So Hollywood has often been described as a liberal bastion in a country that is majoritively right-wing. Thus, there has been many instances of Hollywood movies reflecting the feelings of Democrats in America at the time. And there's no more interesting time period for that for me than the 80s, during the Cold War, during the Ronald Reagan years. So I had to pick two movies to exemplify what the general zeitgeist in America seemed to be around the time of the Cold War. It would be The Thing and They Live, both by John Carpenter. John Carpenter I would have described as being too classy for me in the past. I felt like his movies were just a little bit too slow for me. I couldn't really get into them. I didn't really understand them. Even then, you can pick up on the fact that The Thing is, despite being a remake of an old 50s movie, incredibly relevant to the time period that it came out. There was a lot of fear of invasion. Establishment at the time in America had been pushing people towards a fear that their neighbors, their friends, their families could be communists. So The Thing to me is showing the fears, the anxieties, the stress, the tension that the people of America were feeling, particularly the liberals in the 80s at the time. Whereas They Live comes along then, and that movie is more about the angst towards the system and about the process of essentially deprogramming people out of believing anything that they're fed on TV, in magazines, by the government. They Live is based on a couple of short stories by a writer guy. It's interesting because the film They Live starts with that it's written by basically a pen name. John Carpenter put a fake name on the writer when it was him who wrote it. So to me, They Live is like one of the most sympathetic movies towards communism I've ever seen in my entire life. First solid half an hour of the movie is about the failings of the current capitalistic nature of the government in America during the Ronald Reagan era. It also shows a lot of the censorship and persecution of those who had subversive opinions towards the Conservative Party in America. It's just interesting to me because people on the right seem to view this movie as being for them, whereas the film itself, even just at a cursory glance, comes across as a very communist-leaning movie. We have a series of working men who have been laid off, who are now currently homeless, who are separated from their wives and children as a result of the Reagan government prioritizing corporate interests over the interests of the people. Like every line Keith David says in the first half an hour sounds like it could be a Lenin quote. In case you think I'm looking too far into the idea that this is an anti-capitalist, pro-communist movie, later on in the movie when the film is portraying cops as being either entirely bought over or corrupt or violent, that you see them beating up a priest. But they say essentially the underground militia of people that are resisting against the alien invasion are, one of them says, the police are coming after us because they've been told that we're radical commies trying to take down the government, which is like technically true. That's not incorrect about They Live, but it is about revolution. The character that Roddy Piper plays becomes revolutionary. He dies for the cause. Upon my first viewing a few years ago, I really didn't like the way it ended, that he died and Keith David died. Now, I think it's perfect. And the interesting thing to me is that it shows a lot of unity between races in this movie, between black people and white people specifically. The struggle and the issue, it isn't between white man and black man. It isn't between American and immigrant. It is between the proletariat, the working schlub, and the capital owners. So the liberal reading is that the current capitalistic right-leaning government in power is misleading people and making people docile, exploiting them. Whereas the right-leaning view of this movie would be, oh yeah, the liberal elites in Hollywood and behind the media are taking over and they need to be stopped. It's one of those cases where the film itself, I don't think, could be any more explicit in being communist. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. People can always read whatever they want to read in a movie. People can always project onto a movie. Right-wing governments have pretty much always had a majority control over the world. Right-wing people still can feel as though they are oppressed by the system. There are always going to be liberal countries that they can point to, like New Zealand or various countries in the Scandinavian area, which they can say, it's a nanny state, you can't buy cigarettes anymore, the prisons are cushy. That's the way an alt-righter will take this movie, as a warning that we need to take out all the wokes that are controlling our magazines and our marketing and our advertising. They're not taking away the reading that marketing and advertising is a bad thing. Marketing and advertising is essentially misleading people into consuming things that they don't need to consume. Everyone watching this movie thinks that they're awake. They think that they're already wearing the sunglasses, but a lot of them are not. A lot of them have not been instilled with class consciousness, despite this film doing its best to try and push that on you.